Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Now that my obligatory informative videos are done for the day, you guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And I just saw a video. Yeah, I know that this one's a little bit old, a few weeks old, but I thought I would cover it anyways because I thought it was an interesting point. It was by ScottHermanFitness, who I sometimes give a hard time, but actually most of what Scott says is pretty good. I'll actually give credit where credit is due. So let me put on my +5 hat of Speechcraft. And let's talk about this. All right, guys. So Scott Herman made a video, and I will appreciate the fact, because at first I'm like 67% more back gains. Okay, Scott. But then he said, look, that's just clickbait. It's not necessarily true, but this will still help you. Okay, cool. That's fair enough, man, because clickbait to get views is fine as long as you throw something good in there, good information to go with it. So I am actually not going to hate on that because he actually addressed that in the video. So that's fair play, brother. Now, the thing is, let me summarize basically what he said in the video. And this is what's going to be funny. Let's take everything aside. He said the details. We'll jump into it. Full range of motion is probably a better idea for building muscle mass, right? That's what it comes down to. If we were to summarize what he said in the details, that's what he said. And you know what? That's true. The longest effective range of motion you can do generally produces better hypertrophy outcomes, right? And size, strength, all of that. So what he talked about in there, that one of the biggest mistakes you see is actual form Nazis and personal trainers who actually don't understand biomechanics will have you keep your scapula all the way back on any sort of pulling motion. Now, what does that mean for rows of any type? I don't even want to discuss the silly cable stuff, because for most of you out there, you have no business doing cables for your back. I'm not saying advanced athletes don't have a place for cables. What I am saying is I really am not going to recommend someone with less than 2 to 3 years of lifting experience do cable work for their back. So, I mean, and that's the difference. A lot of people would say, oh, they'll do it for beginners, and I completely disagree. I don't think beginners should be touching these things. You're going to build more overall size and strength by doing big free weight motions and learning to shin up and pull up. And people who say, right, I'm not strong enough to do a pull-up yet. Well, that's why you have reverse bands, right? You hang a band up and do them. Do reverse band pull-ups. Works just fine. That'll get the job done. So let's set aside the fact that he showed cable stuff too, because he did demonstrate them with free weights. So it's like we got both worlds there, and so that's appreciated. Now, what he's talking about is that people stay in scapular retraction. You just want to work that isometrics, and they keep the chest forward and they keep the scapula retracted. That's not actually working the lats and traps and rhomboids and everything through their full effective range of motion. You're going to get better development if you let the scapula come apart and stretch. Right at the bottom of a row, you should stretch. Even me, when I do pin lay rows, because I don't do standing rows. I pin lay row off the floor. At the bottom of each rep, my arms are fully locked and my scapula are spread apart. You are pulling from a stretched position. You're pulling from a stretched position. It's a longer range of motion, and it's part of the function of those muscles. I mean, and incidentally, people always say when they do see me shirtless and moving around that my back is easily my most developed body part. And I'm a power lifter, not a bodybuilder. I don't train any of that for saying, oh man, I just want an amazing back. I don't care. My back is a result of my training. I don't train specifically to have a developed back. But I train my back to be as strong and as athletic as possible, which means I do a lot of heavy pulling through full range of motion, a lot of deadlifting. All right, let's come back over to that point. That whole concept of squeezing at the top, why are you doing that with little light-ass exercises? That's almost, for anyone who's on a well-balanced program, that's a complete waste of time. I would much rather see people on their pull-ups and rows getting that scapula spread, that stretch that he showed. And I'll agree with that. In fact, I'll go so far as to say for maximum back development, that is about 100 times more important than the squeeze on any of those. It's 100 times more important. And the fact that he emphasized that first is the biggest #1 technique, I'm going to absolutely agree. Because that's what's going to give you that wider back. That pulling those scapula apart stretches your lats, works the lats through a full range of motion, gives you more lat development. Now, some people say, well, don't you need that squeeze up there for the mid-traps and the lats and everything, that isometric? Well, here's the thing, guys. You can't use any real weight on that. relative to what you're capable of. I mean, because you're already getting a dynamic motion and your lats and everything are getting fatigued. And so all the mid traps and everything else that you think that you're getting by doing that and squeezing all of that, you're already fatigued. A lot of your other muscles that are involved are too fatigued from doing the rest of the reps. And you're still using a light weight. Isometrics is again squeezing against a serious force. Just deadlift for that. Because you have to squeeze that together on your deadlift. And I want people to think about that for a moment. You have to squeeze that together on your deadlift with a much heavier weight than you can row or do pull-ups with. You're already getting that isometric training squeezing. Furthermore, you're getting all that isometric on everything that you do. Let's say you do all the basic lifts. Well, what do you mean all the basic lifts? Squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press. Think about the movements involved there. Every one of those movements involve a very hard isometric contraction with again, shoulder blades down and back, right? You're getting that on all these other exercises all the time. Like literally every big exercise you do, that's part of your mental cues. Every one of those to help develop those parts of your back, and the deadlift specifically. You're training that all the time. What you're missing is the scapula really coming apart and having to stretch and pull. And Scott hit the nail right on the head with that. He hit the nail right on the head with that. And again, that's what I tell people. You guys always see me when I do pull-ups. I do them from a dead hang. Come all the way down and stretch every single rep. That's what matters. In fact, if you were going to cut something out of the range of motion, I would say that that's the part that needs to be done. If you were going to, and I don't tell you to do partials. I don't think you should do partials. I don't want to be taken as an endorsement of partials. That's more important than the top. Because you're getting that scapular retraction under load with your other big exercises. If we're going to go through the trouble to do this middle and upper back work, you might as well work the functions of it. You're not training all the time anyways, and that's going to be that spread apart. Now the other thing he talks about you can be loose with your form. Yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean, a lot of, again, bodybuilding types, they get so obsessed with mind-muscle connection. They'll look at the research on compensatory acceleration versus mind-muscle connection and things like that. You'd be surprised. Compensatory acceleration, external cues, actually produces better muscle fiber recruitment than mind-muscle connection and trying to maintain perfect form. Here's the thing. There are exercises to where shifts in form can increase or decrease the amount of loading, right? This is absolutely true. When you're dealing with things like rows and stuff, though, he's probably right. If people who are talking about, well, they want any sort of eccentric loading, well, you're going to have to cheat. Because if you're doing an eccentric with a weight that you're capable of lifting with good form, there's actually almost zero training effect on the eccentric rep. And I'm not saying eccentric reps are that important in the grand scheme of things, but he does have a point. If you want any eccentric loading, you're going to have to cheat on an exercise. You're going to have to. Because you can't do eccentrics with a weight you can lift with good form and get a training effect. Not a real one, not anything significant. So the cheat rows and things like that with a little bit of body English, I'm not telling you to cheat excessively, it can help with that sort of thing. The only time you would want to take it out is when you're dealing with issues of axial loading, lower back fatigue due to total training workload. So, I mean, the amount of form cheating that you do on some of these lifts, it's really going to depend on your total training programming and the fatigue you're generating, because it will generate a little more fatigue that you might need to deal with, and it may or may not give you more hypertrophy. But the point is, it's not that important to be strict on form on exercises where bad form won't hurt you. In other words, there are lifts to where sloppy form can cause injuries. Rows, probably not so much. Probably not so much. And in some cases, there's cases where changes in the amount of English you put into it and the cheating can affect which muscles are worked. And I mean, the overhead press is an example of that, right? People say, what do you mean? Well, a strict press where you lay back and you have to start off your chest on every rep works more chest. Works more chest. A push press where you use leg drive works a little more tricep, but you don't get as much chest. Particularly, again, the eccentric end of that tricep at the top coming back down. So exercises like that, there can be some shifts in which muscles get worked. The same thing can happen with rows, but you're still dealing with a set of muscles in the back that as long as you're doing that full range of motion and that stretch, A little bit of cheating is absolutely not going to negatively affect your outcomes. It really isn't. It's not going to hurt you. Not a big deal. Just make sure that you're consistent in the amount you're doing so you can track the overload. So I'm not going to really say that's a good or a bad piece of advice he threw in at the end. I don't think it's harmful in any way. But the main point is that the primary piece of advice he gave, the scapula pulling apart to get a stretch, whether it's rows, chin-ups, pull-ups, is actually the way to get the most out of it. And if you don't do that, you will absolutely shortchange your back development. And don't worry so much about the squeezing and the isometrics because you already get that on every single other big exercise. And if you're serious about training at all, you're going to be doing a ton of squatting, benching, deadlifting, all that stuff anyways. You're getting that training effect already. Focus on what you're not getting with these exercises. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.